If you want to read a story, clap your hands. If you want to read a story, clap your hands. If you want to read with me, then this is the place to be. If you want to read a story, clap your hands. Hi friends, I'm Miss Alex from the Nolensville Branch Library, and today is World Bee Day. Do you know what a bee is? It's that little insect that you can hear going buzz. So in honor of World Bee Day, we are going to read one of my favorite books, Buzz by Eileen Spinelli, illustrated by Vincent Nguyen. Buzz loved being a bee. She loved the taste of honey. She loved dozing in her cozy hive. She loved nosing in her sunlit clover, but most of all, she loved flying. Sometimes Buzz would swoop real low under the blackberry bramble where Snail lived. Sometimes Buzz stopped to visit Snail. Snail, who could not fly, enjoyed hearing Buzz tell about the world beyond the berry bramble. Buzz would buzz the latest. Grasshopper got sick eating too much skunk cabbage. Ew. Mouse is off visiting her city cousin. Sometimes, just before dusk, Buzz would swoop real high to visit Old Owl in his willow tree. Old Owl always had wise things to say. Honey isn't everything. Let sleeping owls alone. One day, when Buzz was out flying, a storm came up, and the wind blew a sheet of newspaper out from under a bench. The headline caught Buzz's eye. Buzz flew in for a closer look. She was shocked as she read the story. Professor declares bees can't fly. The rest of the article was missing, but Buzz had read enough. If someone like Professor Popkins said bees can't fly, then it must be true. Buzz bobbled and wobbled and fell plip to the ground. Poor Buzz. Befuddled, she huddled under the brambles. Snail tried to cheer Buzz. "It's not so bad not being able to fly," she said. Buzz sniffled. "It is for me." Snail offered Buzz a berry blossom. Buzz was not hungry. Berry juice? Buzz was not thirsty. Buzz sniffed the afternoon air. "I smell smoke." She peered into the woods and saw a flicker of a flame. "Fire!" she cried. "Old Owl is in there." Old Owl was a very sound sleeper. Nothing ever woke him before dusk. Buzz had to get to her friend fast. Buzz raced around a fallen pine cone, scrambled over a twig. She stumbled, she tumbled, she tripped and she flipped. Old Owl needed her and all she could do was run. How would she ever get up the tree? Buzz wished she had never read the professor's words. The words thumped like her beating heart as she raced over the forest floor. Bees can't fly, bees can't fly, bees can't fly. I must warn Owl, I must warn Owl, I must warn Owl. The more she thought of Old Owl, the less she thought of the professor's words. Until suddenly, the milkweeds were below her and the firelight was warm on the buzzing blur of her wings. She was flying. She darted into Old Owl's nest. Smoke billowed and made her drowsy. She settled woozily by her friend and buzzed as loud as she could. Can you guys buzz super loud to help? Buzz! She held that note until she toppled into Old Owl's ear. Old Owl awoke with a start. Fire! He cried and swooped from the nest. He perched in the hollow of a nearby maple tree and waited. Luckily, it soon began to rain. Later, when it stopped, Old Owl shook his damp feathers. Then he sneezed. Achoo! Out from his ear popped Buzz. Buzz, said Old Owl, what are you doing in my ear? I think I saved you, said Buzz. And I can fly. Of course you can fly, said Old Owl. You're a bee. Bees fly. Yes, said Buzz. You're right. I am a bee. I can fly. The end. Wasn't that a fun story? You know, I think I want to learn a whole bunch more about bees. Luckily, we have a special friend here today to help teach us everything he knows about bees. We are going to meet Mr. Tommy Job, a real-life beekeeper who will teach us all about bees. So now, let's listen to Mr. Job.
Well, hello. I am Tommy Job from here in Nolensville. I'm a beekeeper. And a more technical name would be called an apiarist. What is an apiary? On my labels, when I make honey, it says Job Apiary, Nolensville, Tennessee. Pure raw honey. I'll talk more about that later. Honey comes from where? From the honeybees. And honeybees are, to me, the most fascinating creatures on earth. And I've been in beekeeping for many, many years. It's very fascinating. And one of the things people worry about with bees is, can they sting you? Well, the little worker bees can sting you. That's their protection. And they have to protect where they live. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Basically, we have in America Italian honeybees and Russian honeybees. But there are 500 different kinds of honeybees. So there's a lot of them in the world. The worst ones are from Africa. They're called Africanized bees that are mean boogers. They can get you. Now, in a beehive, there are 3 kinds of bees. First of all, there's a queen bee. She's the largest bee in the hive. And she is one of a kind. There are no other queen bees in the hive. It's her hive. She has a certain smell. And all the bees in her hive know when she's around. And they take care of her and protect her. And she's the one that lays the little eggs that makes the new bees. The second little bee is a worker bee. And they're all girls. The little worker bee is the one that does all of the work. And what kind of work do? They take care of the nursery where the babies are. They make the honey that the worker bees fly out into the community, to the flowers, and bring back the nectar and the pollen. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And they're not as big as the queen bee, but they are twin sisters because they come from the same eggs as the queen does. Only she's different because she's fed a special food. And she's the only one that gets the food. They start feeding it to her when she's a baby, and she becomes a queen. Or otherwise, she'd just be a worker bee. And it's called royal jelly. And it's fascinating. It's so potent that one queen, this time of year, it's the springtime, when they lay lots of eggs to have lots of workers, the little queen, which is not very big, can lay 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day. That's a lot of eggs in one day. Then there is a third kind of little bee. There's not very many of them because they don't do very much. It's called a drone. He doesn't have a stinger, and he doesn't do anything except mate with the queen so that she can lay eggs. So he does very little, although he eats a lot of food.
You know, we have our own little hive here in the library. I wonder what kind of bees are in here. I think they're worker bees, just like Tommy just explained. But there's so many. Do you think you guys could help me count them? And we'll do it with a song, okay? So, one little bee flying in the sky, flying in the sky, flying in the sky. One little bee flying in the sky, buzz, 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 buzz. Can you guys buzz like a bee with me? Okay, let's see. So we have one bee, and now we have two bees. Two little bees flying in the sky, flying in the sky, flying in the sky. Two little bees flying in the sky, buzz, 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 buzz. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3. 3 little bees flying in the sky, flying in the sky, flying in the sky. 3 little bees flying in the sky, buzz, 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 buzz. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, and I found a 4th bee. 4 little bees flying in the sky, flying in the sky, flying in the sky. 4 little bees flying in the sky, buzz, 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 buzz. Okay, there's just one more bee. So can we count them all? Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 worker bees in the hive. 5 little bees flying in the sky, flying in the sky, flying in the sky. 5 little bees flying in the sky, buzz, 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 buzz. All right, I guess it's time for the bees to go home now. So say bye, little bees. Bye, little bees. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
Buzz.
To work with bees, I have some equipment that I use. I have a hood, which I put on, and it fits on my head, and it covers the top half of my body. I just wear blue jeans. I used to have a total outfit, but this is all I need now. And I crawl inside here, and this keeps the bees from getting too upset and wanting to sting me. So I wear this. I also have some gloves that I put on made of leather, thick enough so that the bees can't sting me. And I also have another interesting little instrument. It's called a smoker. And I put straw or pine needles or leaves or whatever. I can use wood chips. They work very well. And I light it, and it burns, and when the smoke starts coming, I squeeze it, and the smoke comes out. Now, what does that do? It calms the bees down so that they don't get upset and angry. Because at the front of the hive, and let me show you the hive, is a door. And this is where the bees fly in and out of the hive. And if I get too close to the front, they have little guard bees, the little worker bees that are guards. And if they sense something, they will send out a signal, and the bees will attack it. And they have stingers, and they can come get you. This is their home where they live. This is the lid, and we have an inner liner on top with a little hole in it. And then we have, this is where the queen stays. It's called the brooder. And the brooder, let me pull one of these out. The brooder has little teeny tiny hexagon shaped, that's 6 sides, hexagon, shaped cells. And the bees will build out on that cell, and it will be a lot thicker. And they will make little cells out of beeswax. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And that's where the queen lays the eggs for the little babies to be born.
Tommy just brought up hexagons. Do you know what a hexagon is? It's a really cool shape with 6 sides. Can you count all the sides with me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Isn't it a cool shape? Can you think of somewhere else that you've seen a hexagon? I know where I have, on the back of a turtle on their shell. Now let's go back to listening to Tommy.
Now here is a queen cell. It's shaped like a peanut, and it's much larger than the other cells. And those cells are built out on this. Sometimes they're dark like this. They get dark with age. And the bees will build that out, and it will be real thick. It will come out way on out here. And they can put honey or lay eggs in those for the bees to be born. Now, this is the brooder where the queen, and I didn't bring my separator. Oh, I forgot. I have a screen I put on top, and that keeps the queen down here. If I didn't do that, she would go up into this part of the hive, which is called a super. And a super is where the honey is made. You see all those little cells? Well, they will make that all the way out to here, and this will weigh 5 to 10 pounds when it's full of honey. Over here, I have a frame where I just took the honey out of. It's one that was left over, and you can see some of the honey residue, the honey that's on that, and it's real sticky. Honey is very good for you. It's good medicine too. Now, the bees go to the flowers, and in the flower, this is looks like a little daisy. This blossom is full of nectar. Nectar is a little sweet juice, kind of watery, and the bee has a little propolis, which is a straw-like tongue. They stick down into the flower, and they suck the nectar into their front tummy. They have 2 tummies. The front tummy, they carry nectar or water, and the back tummy is for their use. They will suck that nectar into their little tummy and fly back to the hive. Now, sometimes bees will fly up to 2 miles away. That would be all the way on the other side of Nolensville just to get nectar and honey. Then, on their little legs, they have little fuzzy things on their legs, little pockets, and they put pollen. Pollen is yellow. You've seen the flowers, the little pollen, and it's dusty like. The pollen from one flower is what is placed in another flower to make a fruit, so that we will have all of our fruits, like apples and pears and peaches and plums, are all made by honeybees. We wouldn't have any fruit without a honeybee. And we would also not have very many vegetables either, because honeybees make 85% of the foods that we eat. Every third bite you take, a honeybee made that. That's how important they are.
Are you guys ready to read another story? This one is The Bumble Bee Queen by Propolis, illustrated by Patricia J. Wynn. The Bumble Bee Queen begins the spring below ground and all alone. She digs out, she flies. Hungry, she seeks flowers. She drinks nectar with her long, hairy tongue. She begins to search behind the barn, beyond the lake. She buzzes around the bushes between the fields. She is looking for a place to build her colony. A puddle? No. A bush? No. An old mouse nest? Yeah. Now she prepares. She visits flowers and drinks nectar. She gathers pollen. She makes a waxy cup called her honey pot. In it, she stores nectar that she will eat on stormy days when it is not good weather for flying. She forms some of the pollen into a lump. She lays eggs in it and adds a wax covering. In 5 days, the eggs hatch. They are lumpy, plump larvae. No buzzing, no flying, just wiggling. The larvae eat pollen. The queen brings more. The larvae grow, wriggling and chewing. Then one day, the larvae spin cocoons. Can you guys think of another insect that spins cocoons? Right, caterpillars, and then they become a butterfly. But the queen bee keeps working. She collects nectar, she gathers pollen, she lays more eggs. In 10 days, the cocoons ripen. The queen chews them open. Bees emerge, wings fanning. Now the queen has helpers. The new workers gather nectar and pollen and feed the larvae. Summer simmers. The colony grows. The queen lays more eggs. Some form workers, some form drones. Some will become new queens. In fall, nights chill and flowers shrivel. New queens and drones emerge from the hive. Drones from many colonies zoom across the fields, dabbing drops of bee perfume. New queens follow the perfume highways to find drones and mate with them. The new queens drink nectar, search for soft earth, then dig down to wait for spring. But the workers, the drones, and the old queen bee stay above ground. They die. They cannot survive the cold. Old bee, queen of the bumblebees, won't see the next spring come, but her daughters, the new queens, will fly across the fields and build colonies of their own. The end.
Now, the beeswax, which is the little cells are made out of beeswax. I meant to bring a clump of beeswax, and it is made by the bees on their abdomen. This back part of the bee looks like little scales, and they secrete beeswax. Now, it takes 9 pounds, this is a little over a pound actually, pint, takes 9 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of beeswax. So I usually leave the beeswax on the frames so the bees don't have to work so hard when they make more honey. Now, This is a pint of honey. You can see how thick it is. It's very dark. Early in the spring, if I gathered it early, the bees would probably be making it out of white clover, and they would make it out of real light colored flowers, black locusts. The tulip tree, which is the Tennessee state tree, has a lot of pollen and nectar, and it would be a lighter color. This was gathered late in the year, so it's rather dark. The sunflowers, all the goldenrod, all of the darker colors make the darker honey. Now, the little bee has to fly out, gather nectar and pollen, bring it back to the hive. Then there's a bee inside the hive that takes the nectar, processes it in their little body, gives it to another bee. They put it in the cells, in these little cells, and the cells are aimed upwards so the honey doesn't run out. They put it in there, they keep putting it in there, keep putting it in there, and while they're doing that, other bees are fanning their wings to thicken the honey so that it makes it thick. Otherwise, it would be real watery, it would just run out. Now, when they fill up the cell, they seal it off with beeswax so that it's solid all the way across with beeswax. The little worker bees that fly out and get the nectar and bring it back to the hive wonder how many miles a little bee would fly to make this much honey. We would think, oh, maybe 1,000 miles, maybe 100,000 miles. No. To make this much honey, a honeybee would have to fly 2 million miles to make this much honey. That's how hard they work. And when they're in the hive, when it gets real hot in the summertime, the little bees that flap their wings, and they all point in the same direction. It's amazing that you've got all of these bees flapping their little wings, making the air circulate. It's like an air conditioner. In the wintertime, when it's cold, the little bees will fly against each other and create heat because they want to keep it 70 degrees year round. Isn't that amazing? Now, what if there's a crack here? Well, the little bees will go to the juices of plants, and they'll gather those juices, and they make what we call bee glue. It's called propolis. Propolis is real thick stuff, and they seal the cracks so that it will be safe in their home, and animals can't get in. There are a lot of enemies of honey. Bears like honey, we know that. All the different animals like honey. Other insects like honey. And so they will try to get into the hive. And so that's why they have little guard bees to keep them out. Bees even steal from each other because they're hungry for bees. Here is the frame, the little frame with the bees on it. And we call this part right here the foundation. Now, this is made of plastic, but it has beeswax impregnated on it so that it will encourage the bees to build the cells. And they're perfect hexagons. And the bees always know how to make the little cells perfect. Okay. Sometimes the bees feel crowded. The old queen, by the way, the queen can live 6 years. And a little worker bee only lives from 4 to 6 weeks because she wears her wings out and just works herself to death. But the queen can live 6 years. But sometimes she feels crowded when there's not enough room, so she decides to leave the hive. Now, a hive of bees will have on the average 55,000 bees or more, depending on how good the queen is in laying eggs and so on. She may have 80,000 bees. 80,000 bees. when she feels crowded, she will decide to leave the hive, and so she swarms. And when she swarms, she takes about 30,000 bees with her to find a new home. Before she goes, she will lay a new queen egg, or 2 or 3, and the strongest queen then will be the queen of the old hive, and she will take over. Now, there are diseases that get in them. There are little mites, tracheal mites, that get down inside the bees and will eventually kill them. There are varroa mites that get on their legs and suck the juice out of the, that's a bad thing. We have what we call wax moths, which is a nasty little moth, and they'll get in the hive and they'll spin webs all over and lay their eggs and just take over and ruin a hive. Have to watch for those. And then there's one other one that's very, very nasty disease. It's called foul brood, and it gets into the eggs and rots the eggs and ruins them, and it's very dangerous. We have to be very careful about that. Now, I didn't bring my protector, and I apologize. It's a little barrel-like thing that I place 2 of these in it, and I spin the handle, and it goes around and around and around, and centrifugal force pulls the honey, and I have to break open the cells. I have to scrape this over the cell. It's got sharp teeth, and I scrape it over there and open up the cell because they're sealed in beeswax. And then when I put it in the extractor, the honey can come out. And then I have a little spout I open and put it in a bucket and put it in jars for us. When I go get the swarms, by the way, I will take with me a little brush like this. Sometimes I will smoke them if I need to calm them down, but usually when the bees leave a hive to swarm, they all fill themselves with honey. They gorge themselves with honey. And that way they have the energy and the strength to build a new hive for the old queen. So they usually are not interested in stinging you. I probably wouldn't even have to wear bee gear when I get a swarm. Although I got one here in Nolensville a couple of weeks ago, and they were bad and mean, and I got stung a lot of times. But I use a soft little brush, and I can brush the bees back into a hive like this one. This is my last one. I've used up all my others. And I will take some of these out, and the bees will swarm on a limb. This is in a pine tree, and I got one out of a pine tree in Smyrna a few weeks ago. And I can either cut the limb and hold the limb over and pop it, and all the bees will fall in here, and then I close it up and take it home. Or I can brush them off. And sometimes if they're on a big limb or something, the limb's too strong. I can't hit the limb and make them come off. So I have to brush them off and brush them into the hive. Now, let me close with some interesting facts about bees. I said that a strong colony had 55,000 or more bees, and a swarm has over 30,000 bees. A queen that's really a good queen can lay 200,000 eggs a year. One little bug. And in a lifetime, if she lives 6 years, a queen could lay 1,500,000 eggs for one little bug. And bees, as I said, pollinate 85% of our plants. Honeybees are the only insect where nectar can be used for commercial use, that is honey. There are 200 million pounds of honey produced in America in a year, 200 or more million. Honey is so good for you. It can heal wounds. I have healed places on my skin. If you have a sore throat, take a spoonful of honey and put it in your throat and just hold it there. And as it dissolves, it will go into the membranes and heal a sore throat. And it will heal it up because it's just an amazing food. One last thought. Well, let me show you this. A few years ago, we had a newspaper in Nolensville. It was called the Nolensville Dispatch. And they came to my little bee farm. And that's me in my little hood. And here I am gathering honey. And this was the last production of the Dispatch, by the way. I closed them down. But they have a whole thing about the journey to pure honey. And there's all different ways that shows the different things that I do to gather honey. One last thought. The wisest man that ever lived on earth that we know of was Albert Einstein. You know what Albert Einstein said? Albert Einstein said, if honeybees disappeared today on earth, all humans would be dead in 4 years. That's how important honeybees are. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Mr. Tommy Job for coming to teach us everything about bees. I hope you guys had a really good time, and I'll see you guys next time. Happy World Bee Day. Buzz!